if you know me in any capacity or you've talked to me about books and asked me about book recommendations or just art in general, you'll know that Sátántangó by Laszlo Krasznahorkai, who very deservedly recently won a Nobel Prize, you'll know that I consider this book to be sort of the pinnacle of literature and what the human language can achieve. I rave about this book all the time. Ever since I read it for the first time a couple years ago, it kind of ruined books for me in the sense that I really thought there would be nothing that would be able to reach the level of majesty that I found in the prose, the amount of intrigue that I found in the characters, and just how original I found all of the ideas and the themes and how everything connected, and how clever it was. It was so clever. So if you can't tell, I hold this book to an immense level of reverence. And like I said, I sort of held it on a pedestal, and it just sort of ruined books for me in the sense that everything I read since then, I would compare it to Sátántangó, and nothing would ever come close. And that pedestal that I had turned out to be very naive, very predictably naive for two reasons. The first reason is that I'm just not very well read in general. So I've been reading pretty voraciously over the last year, and I still really hadn't found anything close to Sátántangó. It's sort of like Sátántangó was up here, and then light years below was Lost Children's Archive by Valeria Luiselli, which is a fantastic book that I wholeheartedly recommend. But it really was sort of like the Sátántangó test is what I would call it. Every time I'd go to the bookstore, I would just compare it to Sátántangó, and every time it would just fail. It would just never really catch my eye in the same way. But the real reason that that pedestal I had this book on was, a little naive, was because around a month ago, something really did pass the Sátántangó test with like flying colors. So I was at the bookstore and flipping through things as I usually do, and I picked up this book and I was flipping through it, and it really caught my eye in a way that no book had done since Sátántangó. And so I decided to take it home, and I read it pretty quickly, and it kind of changed my life. To be honest, it kind of changed my life. So much so that in the last month, I am now approaching my fourth time reading the book. In fact, after this video ends, I'm literally just going to go finish the last 20 pages of this book, and it's going to be the fourth time that I've read it in the last month. So this book is actually so good that I kind of have been treating it like a Bible. Like I go around and I just sort of advertise it like I'm a missionary, spreading, the religious gospel. And that book is Notes of a Crocodile by Qiu Miaojin, translated into English by Bonnie Hui. And I apologize pretty sincerely for any mispronunciations. But this book is really extraordinary to me. And I've just been telling everyone about it, so now I'm recording a video and I'm telling the internet about it as well. But it just has some of the most beautiful writing that I've really ever seen in a book since Sátántangó. But writing aside and the quality of the prose aside, I really feel like I've never seen an author write about experiences in a way that felt so intensely relatable. And this is the one thing that it really has over Sátántangó, is that I see so much of myself in this book. And you'll see why that's pretty hilariously ironic in just a second when I talk about the actual content of the book. But if you went through my journal and you read entries, they would feel really damn similar to the events and the interpretation of those events that are in Notes of a Crocodile. And I use that word interpretations pretty deliberately because this book is not so much about what happens, but how the author perceives what happens. And that sort of interior dialogue about the events is really what cements this as such a fantastic book. So I'll talk a little bit more about this, why it's so amazing in a second, but I kind of want to just rave about it a little longer, right? I've never felt this level of kinship with a piece of text before, and not only that, I feel incredibly protective about this text because it's so near and dear to my heart. I almost, normally I really like to encourage open discourse about films and movies and anything art, including books. And I don't really care if you like or dislike the same things I do. This is like the one exception to that. I feel like if you don't, see some level of value in this book after you read it, we probably just aren't going to get along in real life. Because to be honest, again, like I've never felt like my own experiences have ever been committed to a page as as I have seen it done here. It wouldn't even be hyperbolic to say that if I could go back in time, if I literally had a time machine and I could go back and talk to myself 5 years ago when I was like the most stupid 18-year-old kid ever, about to go to college and make a bunch of bad decisions, I wouldn't, and I could tell myself one thing. I wouldn't tell myself, who to befriend or who to date. I wouldn't tell myself what stocks to invest in, what lottery numbers were. I wouldn't tell myself what sports games to bet on. I wouldn't even tell myself like the answers to the MCAT exam I would take in my junior year. I would go back and I would tell my younger self to just literally pick up this book and read it as soon as possible and as many times as possible, because there's so much insight into problems that I think a lot of people in this age demographic deal with, that are addressed really, really maturely in this book, especially considering the author was extremely young when she wrote this, in her early 20s, I believe. I don't even think it's crazy to say that if I was like the supreme leader of the human race, and I like the first thing I would do in office is I would just make it a government mandate. If you can read English or you can read Chinese, you have to read this book before your prefrontal cortex develops. Like if you're between 16 and 24, this is like mandatory reading. So I hope you can see that in the same way that I really pine after Sátántangó, and just I consider it just the best thing ever. I feel the same exact way about Notes of a Crocodile, if not even more so, but there's probably a little bit of recency bias there. So as far as what the book is actually about, it's a coming-of-age novel split into 8 notebooks. Each of the notebooks is written from the perspective of this anonymous narrator, and she spends each of the 8 notebooks detailing events throughout a semester of college. So 8 semesters of college, 8 notebooks. Each notebook has a bunch of journal entries, and those journal entries are concerned with many things, but the most salient theme is definitely her sexuality, and this book is known for that, right? This is known for being one of the first major queer novels in Taiwan. And that mostly manifests through her fatal attraction to this one girl who's a couple grades above her, named Shui Ling. But outside of that, she also interfaces with a number of really cool characters at college and outside of college. The main through line being they're all pretty much queer or very eccentric or marginalized in some other way. And so you might be thinking, that's like kind of a narrow niche, right? We're talking about not only gay people, but we're talking about gay women in one decade in one city of Taiwan, right? Like that's a really small niche to focus on, and that's what this book is known for. And so you might feel like it could be hard to get into it if you don't overlap with any of those. But I'm telling you, as a completely straight dude, like a straight male, right? Like I have no overlap with the female experience in this book, who's born in 2003 and raised in America. I have no relation or overlap to any of these demographics, yet somehow I still found it to be one of the most profound and relatable things I'd ever read. And I think that should just be a testament to how deep it has its claws in the mortal coil and the human experience, that it's able to reach way below those demographics and speak to something that is also very fundamentally human. That being said, I do joke with my friend. I was like, dude, I wish I was gay sometimes, because for the sheer fact alone of being able to get a little bit more out of this book. If I could just squeeze a little bit more meaning out of this book, it would just be even crazier, right? So all of that is to say, don't let the demographics be a hesitation for you, because, me, myself, I have almost nothing in common with it, and it has moved me to lengths that pretty much no other book has moved me to. As far as the book itself, like I said, it's a pretty fragmented thing, because it's told in these little vignettes, and those vignettes, even though they're formatted as journal entries, they're not really traditional journal entries, at least not nearly in the way that I would write them. So when I journal, I typically talk about everything that happens in a day, or really major things that happened. She'll talk about really small things, and that's really cool, because she can take something like a friend coming over for a cigarette, and a brief conversation they have, or a brief story that he tells her. And that one thing can be blown up into an entire story in and of itself. And it really gives you an appreciation for the mundanity that encompasses most of human life. Our lives as much as we like to imagine ourselves as having very dramatic things happening, most of our lives, just by sheer quantity, is spent doing very boring things and rituals of tedium. And a lot of those things we take for granted, right? But reading this book, I had a very newfound appreciation for being able to take those really small and seemingly insignificant moments and being able to kind of reach into them and extract something new out of them. So it's really changed the way that I navigate daily life, especially in how I journal and chronicle my daily life. Another really cool thing about this book is that the journal entries themselves, I mean, we kind of condition ourselves when we read books that tension that's built up is meant to have an outlet of release. And after it's released, there needs to be some sort of aftercare, right? There needs to be this sort of resolution. And this book really toys with that. It doesn't, it doesn't handle tension in a way that it is traditionally handled. So a lot of times you will have tension build up and you're feeling like there's some big crescendo into a confrontation or, this altercation or an argument or something like that, or a revelation, right? And sometimes it comes and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes when it arrives, it kind of just ends there and you don't get that catharsis afterwards. And even when you do get catharsis, sometimes that catharsis comes multiple years later in the timeline, to the point where you kind of forgot about, what it originally was that was so was causing so much stress for her, right? You really get the sense that the protagonist kind of has this trouble facing their own memory because, again, like these journal entries, you'll have this major event and then you'll flip the page and you'll be multiple weeks later. And so for some reason, she seems to struggle to face these own events in her life, either due to embarrassment, regret, guilt, dissociation, willful amnesia, intense compartmentalization, or any of the above, right? So that's a really cool theme to think of, especially when you're talking about a book that's told through the perspective of a journal, which is typically meant to chronicle, as many things as possible. Another thing, and the second main reason that I really like this book, if you've ever read Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson, I think you'll agree with me that Carson has a really unique way of describing other people. So the metaphors that she uses are incredibly nifty, and they almost feel like she's inventing new ways to speak about people, right? And that was something I really admired in that book of Carson's, and I totally forgot about it until I went and I found this book, and I feel like it's doing the same exact thing. There's so many moments, really the whole book is just, it consists of small interactions with other characters that often have no relation to each other. So there's probably like 100 times in this book where she's on a bike with someone, sharing a meal or a drink at someone's apartment, listening to them talk while they're drunk, looking at someone in a classroom, looking at someone across the street, reading a letter from someone, speaking to someone on the phone, sleeping over at someone's place, small things like that, where she's just having these intimate interactions with one other person. And the way that she is talking and describing these people, the way that she's having these internal monologues about them, how she's psychoanalyzing them, the way it's done is so incredibly beautiful, and some of the language is just so stunning that it would really make me emotional. And I have to say, I don't cry to books really ever. I hardly cry to movies at all, even if they're like really sad. But this is a pretty singular experience reading it, because it, for a pretty obvious reason I'll get to later, this book is really, really sad. And it would just make me emotional very, very frequently. In fact, there was this girl off Hinge that was talking to me the other day, and she made a comment about my eyes that made me a little insecure. She said they were huge and that she would love to see them swell with tears, which first of all I thought was hilarious, but I literally told her, like, dude, just come over and watch me read Notes of a Crocodile, because there's literally nothing else that makes me emotional to the same extent as this. And the reason that is sort of the elephant in the room, which is that the author of this book commits suicide pretty shortly after this book is published. Now, I don't really often form like a parasocial relationship with artists, authors, filmmakers, musicians, whatever, right? But I really felt like at multiple times in this book that I was sort of interfacing with a classmate of mine. The reason I say that is because, if you're not familiar, I studied film in college a little bit, and Miaojin is like, dude, she's like a certified cinephile. Some of the films that she talks about in this book are like insane ball knowledge. So she talks about like Godard, Nostalgia by Tarkovsky, which I have to say is an incredible pull, if you think about the themes of exile and where both of those artists are at in their career when they make that work. So when she makes Last Words from Montmartre, which is her other book, she's at a very similar stage as Tarkovsky is when he makes Nostalgia. So I thought the conversation between that was like insane. Her moment when she writes about The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, she writes about the ending scene of The 400 Blows, and she kind of mimics the style of it in this book. And it is just one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was just so insanely beautiful and clever and profound for reasons I really can't even articulate. The last words in this book are a quote from Derek Jarman, which is really cool. And that's actually a trend that she has as well. In Last Words from Montmartre, the last words of that book are actually a quote from a film called The Suspended Step of the Stork by Theodoros Angelopoulos, who's a Greek filmmaker. Now, if you know that film, like, again, that's crazy ball knowledge. Like, that is a really obscure film, especially at the time that these books were written. So she has so much passion for film. She was a nascent filmmaker herself. As a sort of side tangent, if you know where to find her 1991 short film, please let me know somehow, because I've been trying to find it, and I would really appreciate any access I can get to that film. All of that is to say, her passing is an incredible loss to the community of literature, the community of film especially. She was a cinephile in every regard, and I just have so much admiration and respect for her in a way that I've really never had for any other artist out there. And being able to knowing that when you go into this book and reading some of the things that she writes about is pretty depressing, because in many ways, just like Last Words from Montmartre, this is a semi-autobiographical work, right? And a lot of the struggles that this protagonist goes through are sort of aided by the really cool characters that are surrounding her. So she ends up finding a pretty awesome support network of people who kind of understand her and recognize her. And you can't help but think that that's sort of maybe wishful thinking on the part of the author, in the sense that maybe there is a longing to have those characters in her own life that she didn't necessarily have. I don't want to speculate too much, but that was at least my interpretation. As with any of my thoughts on literature, I like to read a little bit from the book itself, just to give you a sense of how the author writes and how they decide to fill up a page. So I'm going to read a really small passage because I really don't want to spoil too much. Not that there is much to spoil, but again, this book is so beautiful. I feel like every sentence is really a gift to experience for the first time. I'm aware of how corny and cliche that sounds, but I'll read a small passage from around halfway through the book. And this is her describing Shui Ling, who is, again, the girl that she has this huge crush on, and who's sort of her like lesbian awakening, I guess. So she writes, Shui Ling was the only thing I had that was real. That year, my attic bedroom on Tingzhou Road became like a coffin in which I lay awake at night, painfully alone. She was the only one I'd been close to, and now there was no place where my reality converged with the outside world. The look in her eyes, the sound of her voice, snatches of our conversations. Those sensory impressions formed a leech that attached itself to me and started sucking my blood. I sealed the leech in a plastic bag and kept it at a distance, but then I discovered white foam spilling over my windowsill. The ocean was depositing its frothy residue, filling my sanctum with wave after wave. To my horror, she insistently lived on inside of me. So I hope that you can, if you have no context at all, I hope you can just see how beautiful the language is. So I really have to give credit to the translator as well. But if you have read the book, or you can just do some sort of basic analysis here, I hope you can see how clever all of that imagery is, right? This idea of a parasite or a leech that you hate and you want to get rid of, but you also want to keep it in like a plastic bag to look at it. And there's this mirror between the plastic bag and the window. They're both transparent mediums. And then you have this idea of sucking blood out of the body, but also water from the ocean crashing against your windowsill. That's just the level of insane writing that completely saturates this book. So if you do go read this book, which I sincerely hope you do, please come back and think about page 121 where that quote is and talk to me about it, because I'm kind of going crazy. If you can't tell, I have no one to talk to about this book, except some random people I found on Reddit. But I really can't rave about this enough. And I'll just conclude by saying that I really meant it when I said that every person who can read this book should read this book. It touches on pretty much anything that could plague someone who is trying to find their way in life, or who's lost their footing, or who's stumbling and falling down. If you've ever struggled with relationships, love, sexuality, depression, loneliness, finding a job in the shitty job market today, friendship, family, graduating college, these are all things that the protagonist, or I should say the author, is thinking about pretty extensively and in a really mature and profound way in this novel. And I don't care how old you are, if you have ever struggled to belong, if you have ever felt like you don't belong, I think if you read this book, you will find a sense of belonging within it. That's certainly what happened for me, and that's why I've really come on here to just advertise this book, because I feel like it's such an incredibly important work of literature, of art, and the loss of the author is probably one of the greatest tragedies that I can think of. So please do her an honor, go to your local bookstore, pick this up, and give it a read. And if you read it in English, please give your flowers to the translator as well, who really did a phenomenal job.